I want to describe two different versions of the same person to you, and I want you to tell me which one sounds more familiar. Version 1. You know you should be doing better with money. You've known for a while. You've downloaded the budget apps, you've read the articles, you've watched the videos. You understand intellectually that you need to spend less than you earn, invest the difference, and stop making financial decisions based on how they make you look to other people. You know all of this. And yet somehow, the month ends the same way it always does. A little short, a little stressed, with a quiet, uncomfortable feeling that you're running out of time to get this right. Version 2. A few years ago, you were version 1. Then something shifted. Not dramatically, not all at once, but something clicked, and the way you think about money changed at a fundamental level, and the decisions that used to feel impossible started feeling obvious. And now, when you look at your bank account, you feel something you genuinely did not feel before. Not rich, necessarily, just in control, like the money is finally going where you actually want it to go. Here's what I figured out after spending years studying the difference between those two versions of a person. The shift isn't about information. Both versions of that person have access to exactly the same information. The shift happens in stages, specific, predictable, sequential stages that almost everyone moves through on their way to finally getting their finances right. And there is one stage right in the middle where the overwhelming majority of people get stuck, not permanently, but long enough that some of them never get out. Today we are going through all 5 stages. I'm going to tell you exactly what each one looks, sounds, and feels like from the inside, the specific thoughts, the specific behaviors, the specific emotional patterns, because the only way to move through a stage faster is to know with precision which one you're actually in. My name is Zane, and this channel, Wealth with Zane, exists for one reason: to close the gap between knowing what to do with your money and actually doing it. If you have ever felt like you understand personal finance better than your bank account would suggest, hit subscribe and give this video a thumbs up, because that gap, that specific, maddening gap between knowledge and behavior, is what every single video on this channel is built to close. Let's start at the very beginning. Stage 1. The fog. Stage 1 doesn't feel like a financial stage. It feels like normal life. You're earning money, you're spending money. There's usually just enough, or occasionally not quite enough. But the shortfall is never so dramatic that it forces a real reckoning. Bills get paid, mostly on time. There's occasionally some left over. And what happens to that leftover is something you've never examined very closely, because examining it closely has always felt vaguely threatening, like looking directly at something you're not ready to see. The defining characteristic of Stage 1 is not ignorance, it's avoidance, and there's a very specific reason it persists. In Stage 1, money feels like a force that happens to you, rather than a tool you operate. Your paycheck arrives, your expenses consume it, the month ends, repeat. There's no sense of agency in this loop, no feeling that the outcome is something you're choosing, because every individual spending decision feels small and justified, and nobody has ever sat down and shown you what all those small, justified decisions add up to in aggregate. I want to tell you something important about Stage 1, because I think the way personal finance content usually addresses it does real damage. Most financial content treats Stage 1 people like they're simply uninformed, like if you just showed them the right budget template, the right investment account, the right debt payoff strategy, the problem would be solved. So Stage 1 people absorb enormous amounts of financial information, feel briefly motivated, open a budget app, use it for 11 days, and then stop and feel worse about themselves than they did before. The information isn't the problem. The relationship with money is the problem. Specifically, the belief, often completely subconscious, that money is something that happens to you, that the amount you have is a reflection of circumstances you didn't entirely choose, that people who are doing better financially are doing so because of luck, or family money, or some specific advantage you don't have access to. This belief isn't malicious, it's protective, Because if money is something that happens to you, your financial situation isn't really your fault. And your financial situation not being your fault is a genuinely comfortable place to live, right up until it stops being comfortable. The exit from stage 1 isn't a budget, it's a single moment of ownership. It's the first time you sit down, add up every number honestly, look at the total, feel genuinely uncomfortable, and instead of closing the laptop and making peace with the discomfort, you let the discomfort stay. You let it mean something. You decide in that moment that the outcome of your financial life is a variable you are going to take responsibility for. That moment, and it is a specific moment, most people who've had it can describe it in detail, is the door out of stage 1 and into stage 2. Stage 2, the awakening. Stage 2 is the most energizing stage and the most dangerous one in terms of longevity, for reasons I'll explain. In stage 2, everything clicks. You've run the numbers. You've seen, often for the first time with genuine clarity, where the money goes. You've picked a system, a budget, a debt payoff method, an investment plan, a savings target, and you're executing it with a level of discipline that surprises even you. The apps are being updated, the credit card balance is going down, the savings account is going up. You feel, possibly for the first time in your adult financial life, like you are in charge. This stage has a specific feeling I want to describe accurately, because if you're in it right now, I want you to recognize it. It feels like you've been asleep your whole financial life, and you've just woken up. You look back at the person you were 6 months ago with genuine bafflement. You don't understand how you let things get that way. You tell people about what you're doing, friends, family, anyone who will listen, because you genuinely cannot believe this information isn't more widely known. Or if it is widely known, why more people aren't acting on it. This is the stage where people start their own personal finance Instagram accounts. This is the stage where people decide they want to become financial advisors. This is the stage where people call their parents and explain compound interest to them. I say this without judgment because I've been there, and the enthusiasm is genuine, and it's coming from a real place. The problem is the enthusiasm isn't a reliable predictor of long-term behavior change, because stage 2 is running almost entirely on motivation, and motivation, as anyone who's tried to maintain a habit for more than 3 months knows, is the least dependable fuel there is. Stage 2 people typically do extremely well for somewhere between 2 and 6 months. The changes are real, the numbers are moving in the right direction. Then one of several things happens. An unexpected expense arrives, a car repair, a medical bill, a trip that wasn't planned for, and it disrupts the system more than expected. Or the initial dramatic progress begins to slow because the easy wins have been captured and the remaining progress requires sustained discipline for smaller incremental gains. Or life simply gets complicated in ways that make the elegant budget spreadsheet feel disconnected from reality. And here's the critical moment. The person in stage 2 at this juncture does one of two things. They either recommit, adjust the system, accept that progress is going to be slower and less linear than the early weeks suggested, and in doing so, they begin the transition to stage 3, or they slip. They miss a tracking week. They overspend in a category because they've been stressed and they deserve it. And then, because of the way the human brain works, because of a well-documented psychological phenomenon called the what the hell effect, one slip becomes permission for another slip, and the system slowly unravels, and a few months later they're back at stage 1 with worse credit and a stronger internal narrative that financial discipline just isn't really who they are. Stage 2 fails almost exclusively because people build their system around motivation rather than structure. Motivation is how you start. Structure is how you continue. The people who move successfully from stage 2 to stage 3 are the ones who figured out, often by failing ones first, that the goal is to build a financial system that runs even on the days you can't summon a single drop of enthusiasm for it. Stage 3, the plateau, and why most people never leave it. Here it is, stage 3. This is where I need you to pay the closest attention, because this is where most people reading this right now actually are, and because stage 3 is the most deceptive stage in the entire sequence. Stage 3 looks from the outside like success, and from the inside it feels like a very specific kind of frustration that is difficult to articulate to people who haven't felt it. In stage 3, you are doing the things. You have a budget, or something close enough to a budget. You have some savings. You're not in the kind of debt that keeps you up at night, or if you are, you have a plan for it. You are contributing to a retirement account, maybe not as much as you should be, but something. You have figured out the basics, and you are executing them with reasonable consistency. By any objective comparison to where you were in stage 1, you are doing significantly better. And yet, there is a persistent, low-grade sense that the work you're putting in isn't translating into the progress you expected. The savings account balance is growing, but slowly. Not slowly enough to explain the anxiety, but slowly enough that the gap between where you are and where you want to be still feels enormous. The retirement account is there, but when you actually look at the number and imagine what it needs to become over the next 30 years, something in your chest tightens. You're doing everything the articles told you to do, and the articles said it would start feeling better by now. This is stage 3. Correct behavior, insufficient results, and a creeping suspicion that there's something you're missing, but you can't identify what it is. Let me tell you what it is. Because there are actually two completely different things that trap people in stage 3, and they require different exits. The first trap is optimization without strategy. Stage 3 people are almost always very good at the tactical level of personal finance. They know which credit card has the lowest rate. They know the difference between a Roth and a traditional IRA. They have automated transfers set up. What they haven't done is step back far enough to ask the actual strategic question, what is this all actually for? What does financially right mean for my specific life, my specific values, my specific version of what a good life looks like? Without that answer, financial management becomes an end in itself rather than a means to one. And that's an exhausting place to operate from long term, because you're running hard without a clear destination. The people who get stuck in this version of stage 3 are often, paradoxically, the most financially literate ones. They can talk confidently about asset allocation and debt-to-income ratios. They have all the tools. What they're missing is a vivid, specific, emotionally compelling answer to the question, what am I actually building toward? And until they have that answer, the discipline required to stay on track becomes harder and harder to sustain, because discipline in service of a vague goal is significantly less durable than discipline in service of a specific, emotionally meaningful one. The second trap is lifestyle inflation running exactly parallel to income growth. This is the one I talk about most on this channel, because it's the one that's hardest to see while it's happening. In stage 3, income is typically growing, career is progressing, raises are arriving. And because the stage 3 person is doing everything right, has the budget, has the savings, has the retirement account, there's a quiet, usually unexamined permission structure that forms around the income growth. I've earned this. I'm responsible in all the important ways. I can afford to upgrade this. The upgrade feels justified because each individual upgrade is affordable. The better apartment, the newer car, the nicer restaurants, the premium gym, the business class seat on the international flight. Each one, considered individually, is within budget. The problem is that the lifestyle upgrades compound at exactly the same rate as the income growth, which means the gap between what you earn and what you keep, your actual wealth-building capacity, never widens. You make more, you spend more, the savings rate stays flat, and a decade passes that could have been the most powerful compounding decade of your financial life, but instead just funded a progressively more expensive version of the same month. People don't notice this happening because they're comparing themselves to their past selves, where the comparison is favorable, rather than to the trajectory they need to be on, where the comparison is deeply uncomfortable. You were broke at 24. You're not broke at 32. You're doing better. But doing better than broke is not a financial destination. It's a starting condition. The exit from stage 3 requires two things happening simultaneously. First, you need to answer the strategic question, not vaguely, not approximately, but with specific numbers and a specific timeline attached. Not, I want to be financially free someday. I want X dollars saved by age Y, generating Z dollars per month in passive income, at which point I will have the option to do W. Second, you need to find the gap between your income growth and your lifestyle growth and aggressively widen it, not permanently, not through austerity, but with a conscious decision that for a specific defined period, income growth gets funneled into wealth-building capacity rather than lifestyle upgrades. Both of these things are uncomfortable. The first requires honesty about what you actually want, which turns out to be a harder question than it sounds for most people. The second requires resisting a pressure, social, psychological, and deeply human, that most people around you are not resisting, which makes resistance feel abnormal even when it's exactly the right move. The people who successfully exit stage 3 are almost always able to point to a specific moment where the uncomfort of staying became greater than the discomfort of changing, not a piece of information that changed their mind, a moment. Sometimes a conversation, sometimes a calculation, sometimes just a quiet Tuesday morning looking at their accounts, where they decided the plateau was no longer acceptable. Stage 4, the acceleration. Stage 4 is where the work you've been doing starts to compound, and it's as close to genuinely exciting as personal finance gets. The defining feature of Stage 4 is that the financial system you've built starts producing results that feel disproportionate to the effort you're currently putting in. This is because of two forces operating simultaneously. The first is actual compound interest, doing what it's always theoretically done in the examples, but is now doing it with real numbers in your real accounts, for the first time at a scale that's large enough to feel meaningful. Your investment account grows in a good month by more than your contribution that month. The interest your savings earns is a number that would have covered a real expense a few years ago. The math that always looked good on paper starts looking good in reality. The second force is behavioral. By stage 4, the financial habits that required enormous willpower in stage 2 and frustrating discipline in stage 3 have become, largely, automatic. The savings transfer happens and you don't think about it. The investment contribution comes out and it doesn't create anxiety. You've lived within a structure long enough that the structure no longer feels restrictive. It feels like your life. The mental bandwidth that stage 2 and stage 3 required for financial management has been dramatically reduced, and that bandwidth is now available for other things, including thinking about your finances at a higher strategic level rather than a purely tactical one. Stage 4 people make significantly better financial decisions than Stage 3 people, not because they have more information, but because they're making decisions from a fundamentally different emotional baseline. Stage 3 decisions are often reactive, made in response to stress, anxiety, comparison, or the fear of missing out. Stage 4 decisions are proactive, made from a place of security, with a clear sense of where the decision fits into a larger strategy. This is also the stage where people in your life start noticing a change in how you talk about money, not because you're talking about it more. Stage 4 people often talk about it less because it's no longer a source of anxiety, but when it does come up, there's a qualitative difference in the conversation. Less, I can't afford that, which is often really, I've chosen not to prioritize that, and more actual agency in how financial choices are framed. Stage 4 has its own risk, which I want to be honest about because most personal finance content doesn't acknowledge it. The risk is complacency. The system is working, the accounts are growing, the stress is down, and there's a temptation, once the pressure is genuinely off, to stop pushing, to settle into the good enough that Stage 4 represents, rather than continuing towards Stage 5. Stage 4 is a genuinely good place to be. The danger is confusing a good place with the final destination. The move from Stage 4 to Stage 5 is not about doing more, it's about doing different. It's the shift from accumulation as a goal to wealth as a tool. And making that shift requires a level of clarity about what you actually want your money to do for your life that most people, even in stage 4, haven't fully developed yet. Stage 5. The alignment. Stage 5 is the hardest to describe, not because it's complicated, but because it sounds aspirational in a way that makes it feel more distant than it actually is. Stage 5 is not about having a specific number. I want to be very clear about that, because personal finance content has done enormous damage by implying that there is a dollar amount at which life becomes qualitatively different and everything gets easier. There isn't. The people I've talked to who've reached genuinely high levels of wealth and remain miserable about money are almost exclusively people who stayed in stage 4, accumulation mode, past the point where it was serving them, without ever making the transition to stage 5. Stage 5 is alignment. It's the condition where how you spend money and how you want to live your life are pointing in exactly the same direction, with no meaningful gap between them. Let me describe what that looks like in practice, because I think the abstract version is less useful than the concrete one. A stage 5 person does not experience the Sunday anxiety about money that is so common among high earners in stage 3, not because they have so much money that the anxiety is irrational, but because the structure of their financial life has been deliberately designed to match their actual values, so the numbers moving in and out of their accounts are moving in directions they've consciously chosen, rather than directions that just happen to them. A stage 5 person does not make financial decisions based primarily on what those decisions signal to other people, not because they're indifferent to perception, but because they've done enough internal work to know the difference between what they actually want and what they've been conditioned to want, and they've built a financial life around the former. This sounds simple. It is not simple. Disentangling your genuine preferences from the preferences you've absorbed from advertising, social comparison, and cultural conditioning is one of the most difficult exercises in self-knowledge most people will ever attempt. A stage 5 person has answered the specific question that stage 3 people are always avoiding. What is enough? Not as a philosophical abstraction, as a number, as a lifestyle, as a specific, vivid description of a day in their life at the point where they would consider themselves financially whole. And they've built a system aimed at that target, rather than at a vague and perpetually receding version of more. Here's the thing about stage 5 that most people find surprising when I describe it. It's not as far away as it looks. The gap between stage 4 and stage 5 is not a financial gap, it's a clarity gap. Most stage 4 people already have or are close to having the financial resources to reach alignment. What they're missing is the specific, examined answer to what alignment actually looks like for them. And without that answer, they keep accumulating, keep optimizing, keep doing all the right tactical things, while the actual goal of the whole exercise remains undefined. The work of stage 5 is not financial in the traditional sense. It's the work of deciding, specifically, concretely, with real numbers attached, what you want your money to make possible. Not what you want to have, what you want to do, to experience, to give, to build, to leave behind. And then reverse engineering the financial requirements of that life and pointing your entire financial system at it with the same precision and discipline you brought to your budget in stage 2. When people ask me what the final stage of getting your money right looks like, I always come back to the same answer. It looks like freedom from the question. Not because you've stopped caring about money, but because the system is so well designed and so well aligned with what you actually want that money stops being the thing you think about when you wake up at 3 in the morning. It becomes instead a tool, useful, important, worth managing well, but no longer the dominant anxiety of your internal life. That is the destination, and it is reachable. Not for everyone at the same pace, not through the same path, not with the same numbers, but through these stages, in this sequence, by every person willing to sit with the discomfort long enough to move through it. So, let me give you the map one more time, clean and simple.
Stage 1 is the fog, the stage where money happens to you. Avoidance is the dominant financial strategy, and the exit requires a single, honest moment of ownership. Stage 2 is the awakening, high energy, real progress, dangerously dependent on motivation, and the exit requires replacing motivation with structure before the motivation runs out. Stage 3 is the plateau, the stage where most people are, where correct behavior isn't producing expected results, and the exit requires answering the strategic question and widening the gap between income growth and lifestyle growth. Stage 4 is the acceleration, where the work compounds, the habits become automatic, the decisions improve, and the risk is settling for good enough rather than continuing toward alignment. Stage 5 is alignment, not a number, not a luxury, but the specific condition where how you spend money and how you want to live your life are pointing in exactly the same direction, and the question that used to wake you up at 3 in the morning has lost its power over you.
Here's the question I want to leave you with. Not which stage you want to be in, which stage you're actually in right now. Because the only path through is honest identification of where you're starting from, not where you wish you were, not where you were a year ago, not where you'll be when things settle down. Right now, this month's, this specific version of your relationship with money. If you're in stage 1, the work is ownership. If you're in stage 2, the work is structure. If you're in stage 3, and most of you are, the work is clarity and courage. If you're in stage 4, the work is definition. If you're in stage 5, share this video with someone you care about who's stuck in stage 3, because the most useful thing you can do at stage 5 is help close the gap for someone still in the fog. That's the whole map. I'll see you in the next one.